message to the Scottish Government. Mainly this is about nuclear weapons directed at the British state. What we say to the Scottish Government as well, we want them to campaign and fight for the removal of nuclear weapons on day one of independence. We will not accept a partial solution. We will not accept a breathing space. It is their job to get rid of nuclear weapons the day we become independent. Nothing more, nothing less.
Yes!
A message to Nicola Sturgeon, as well as the Tory government and the British state. Just now, our first speaker, everybody knows he is, Tommy Sheridan. Up you come, Tommy.
Thanks very much, Bob. I was caught out there, I wasn't sure we were starting right away. So I want to just say to you, well done, each and every one of you, for coming here today and making a stand for two of the
each and every one of you for coming here today and making a stand for two of the most important issues that are surely tied up with independence. Now, the first issue that should generate massive support across Scotland for independence, we're all aware of it, and that is that in independent Scotland there will be no Tory government. So that's the first thing. That is the most important. Right, we know that. But tied up with that, brothers and sisters, tied up with that, Scotland hasn't voted Tory since 1955. But there was a vote in the British Westminster Parliament in 2017. And that vote was to upgrade these immoral monsters behind me. It was to upgrade the Trident nuclear weapons system and to commit a budget at that time of £205 billion to the development and upgrade of the new Trident nuclear submarine force. £205 billion. There are train drivers on strike today. There are communication workers on strike yesterday. There were RMT members on strike on Wednesday. There's never enough money to pay ordinary working class people a decent wage, but there's always enough money for these weapons of mass destruction. And that's why, integral to the question of independence and a reason to back independence is surely the commitment to unilateral nuclear disarmament. We don't just have the chance, brothers and sisters, to build a new Scotland that puts social justice and economic equality at the forefront of everything we do. We don't just have the chance to tackle inequality and poverty by using the massive wealth that we have as a nation on our ordinary people, not in the top 1%. We don't just have a chance to tackle the crime of homelessness and the scandal of poverty pay. We also have the chance to make a stand across the whole planet and say loud and clear that Scotland is a nation that believes in peace, and that's why we're getting rid of our nuclear weapons, brothers and sisters. Some people say, send them to Plymouth, send them to Portsmouth. I say send them to the River Thames, right out the Westminster Parliament. If they want them, they can have them. We have to, a week from now, we have to say that it's important to be here as a token of remembrance of the single biggest crime. You hear a lot just now about committing acts of war, crimes against humanity. Well, we should be here today. In 7 days from now, it will be exactly 77 years since the single biggest crime against humanity was committed. And they write a narrative and they distort history to hide the reality that there was absolutely no justification to drop the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki on the 6th and the 9th of August of 1945. Absolutely no justification. It was based on racism, it was based on bigotry, and it was based on a desire for America to announce to the rest of the world that they were now the biggest bully on the planet. They had the possession of nuclear weapons. They didn't give a damn about the 120,000 that were exterminated, vaporized on the 6th of August in Hiroshima 1945, and within a year 140,000 had perished. And they certainly didn't give a damn 3 days later when they gave permission for the bombing of Nagasaki and the loss of another 140,000 souls who were literally burned to death. Brothers and sisters, please never forget that war crime. Always try and keep in your hearts, keep in your mind that independence isn't just about better jobs, better houses, better opportunities for our young people. Independence is about unilateral nuclear disarmament as well, and that's worth supporting. Thanks very much.
I'm a gate crasher. Hello, my name's Mike Fennick. I want to read two short things to you from those two letters, dated the 6th of April, which you might recognise as an important date. The first document is what's called the Declaration of a Sovereign Scot. Now, some of you I know are here to sign your own individual copy of that. I want to give you a second reason for considering it, which is in the last paragraph of that Declaration of Sovereign Scots. It reads, "And in an international context, to support the United Nations Treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons by the removal of all nuclear weapons from Scotland." Not a lot of people in terms of the Sovereign Scot Declaration know that paragraph's in there. That's the letter I sent the same day as I wrote that, and it went to the United Nations. For a very specific reason, I dated that the 6th of April, because on the 20th of January 2021, we saw the very first international legal treaty, which is what is behind the UN prohibition on nuclear weapons. And the purpose of the declaration is to send them to the United Nations and not look for international recognition in Scotland's fight for its independence, but to look for international participation. If you want to be part of that, see me later. I've got the forms with me. You can sign your own individual declaration. Thank you very much.
That was Mike Fennick there. That's who this live stream is. I'm just helping him a wee bit.
As you know, the campaign for nuclear disarmament has been going on for a number of years now, so it's not a new thing, and we've got with us today Isabel Lindsay, a veteran campaigner against nuclear weapons and nuclear war, to address the rally. Isabel.
I demonstrated here first, I think it was around 1963. Our main emphasis obviously had been the Holy Loch, but then with the deal between the British government and the US, it turned to here. This is not about security for the ordinary people. This is about the status of the British state. It lost an empire, it had to parade as a big power, and it believes its status as a big power depends on having 200 60 bombs, nuclear bombs, in this area. The irony and the truth, which isn't really presented even to the people in England, never mind Scotland, is that the UK is not really a nuclear power. There are 8 independent nuclear systems in the world. It is 8 too many. This one is totally dependent on the United States. The British government leases it from the missiles from the United States. It sends them back there for servicing. And although the bombs are made here and the subs, they can't be finalized until the US makes its decisions on design. And I think we can say with almost absolute certainty that the US has not given up control over targeting. It is convenient, it's financially useful to them to have the UK posing as an independent nuclear state, but it's not. We have to realize the risks that are involved here. And just a few days ago, we had 2 lorries passing through Glasgow. This happens quite regularly. Each of them with 2 nuclear warheads in them, passing over the Kingston Bridge. Now, many of you might have been just in the vicinity, a few miles away, and nobody is told about this. Nobody is presented with the risks that are there of not just accident, terrorism, whatever. And we are told that it all has to be secret in case of terrorism. Well, if a lot of very fine volunteers in Newport for years and years and years have been able to trace the movements from Barfield up to here, then the secrecy is hardly anything to do with terrorism. It's refusing to tell people that there are nuclear bombs passing past their houses, past their communities. Now, it's very interesting, both disappointing but interesting, how little is said in Scotland, including, I may say, by some senior people in the SNP, how little is said about the Irish example. You would think that would be something we would be proclaiming, how successful, how respected Ireland is in the international scene. Ireland was one of the elected members in the United Nations on the Security Council. Ireland has played a key role for decades in UN peacekeeping. Ireland played a key role in the cluster bomb treaty and in many other initiatives. And Ireland has played a key and very well respected role in the development of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. This is something we should be saying. A smaller country than us, a country without the kind of international linkages in many ways that we have. Ireland has been able to do this. Ireland has welcomed, promoted the TPNW. Ireland is respected internationally. So can Scotland. And this is not what gives us respect in the world. We will not have a Guantanamo on the Clyde. What gives us respect in the world is the contribution that we will make to peace and disarmament. Now, just a reminder before I finish that Scottish CND had a film made about this place. Because again, how little so many of the people in Scotland know what's here. I have obviously seen it grow and development, and my goodness, the amount of money that has been sunk into this place over the decades. But we've got a film of this. It's being shown, a guided tour of the unacceptable, and it's in Edinburgh in the Old Royal High School on Tuesday the 9th of August. So please try and go along, and if you have friends or others who are interested, encourage them to come too. Thank you.
Thanks, Isabel. As people are aware, Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP said that there will be they are trying through the Supreme Court to bring about a Scottish independence referendum in October next year. A lot of us are sceptical as to whether a court of the British state is going to turn around and say to Nicola, yeah, go ahead and have your referendum. You know, it's an institution that's there, put there by the British state, and so is it going to turn around and say, yeah, on you go, have it? Are they going to do it in a situation in opposition from whatever government is in power in Westminster? But either way, if we are going to get an independence referendum, it will take the activity of people like you, ordinary people in Scotland, working people in Scotland, to campaign and fight, to take to the streets and organise to bring about that referendum and make it successful. So campaign groups across Scotland need to put an effort into the next year or so to try and make sure that happens. And we've got an organisation here now, Scotland, and a representative, Charlotte Ahmed, who's going to come up and speak to us just now on behalf of one of these campaign groups. Charlotte.
Hello everyone, thanks Bob. My group Now Scotland is responsible for printing these placards and other things. But the fact that we're all here today means that we are leaders of this movement. And one of the things that I am really worried about is the political leadership of our movement. This fast lane abomination is a constant reminder that we are not in charge of what happens in our own country. This was put here at the behest of the Americans, not the Scottish people. We still don't have a say into what happens to it, what happens in it. And yet we are in a time of increased war and warmongering. Tommy used the word crisis. There's crises all over the world. Do you feel safer because this is here? Do you feel safer? No, we are not safe. It does not create peace and security. It creates insecurity. It creates inequality. And it also creates the sense that although this is a democratic country, we are actually occupied by the warmongers here. We should have got rid of this years ago. So what are we going to do because it's still here? Well, we can fight for independence. The real leaders of a movement today against the establishment and against the state, in my opinion, are not the political parties. They're ordinary people and ordinary people organising. In organisations like Now Scotland, I'm not claiming we're huge or that influential, but I'll tell you what, the people they're most scared of today are the trade unions. There are trade unions that have members working in this place who I'm sure want to have their voice said about what can be an alternative to this abomination, about how their jobs can be turned into positive jobs for a green future, for renewable energy. That is the future, not nuclear power and the weapons that are made from the nuclear fissionable material. For people who say and are arguing now, oh, we've got a climate crisis, we've got an energy crisis, nuclear needs to be part of that mix. No, nuclear is not part of that mix. Are you going to be responsible for a legacy given to your children and grandchildren of nuclear material that could kill people 100 times over, well into thousands of years in the future? You do not have the right to do that to your children and your grandchildren. All nuclear power, we should get rid of it. So do not use that argument in arguments about climate change. We have the ingenuity, we have the engineering tradition, and we have the people that can turn green energy and renewables into a reality. But that will not happen if we're ruled by Westminster. And I'm not hearing a great deal from Holyrood about this either. I don't know if you were worried about some of the decisions and the opinions of some people at the top of the SNP about what they're going to do with this. Rent it out. What does that mean? I want it gone. Who here wants to rent this out to an imperialist power? Anybody? Nobody. We want rid of nukes. We want rid of nuclear weapons, nuclear power stations, and we want to build a movement from the grassroots up. And I am increasingly worried that the people who are already at the top neither have the vision nor the fight in them to achieve it. So we will be there. We will be there, and I urge you, I know you've taken an effort to be here. It's not the easiest place to get to, for obvious reasons. But we, the ordinary people, the rank and file of this movement, need to step up and put pressure on. You need to be out at all the demonstrations, supporting striking workers, supporting the fight for independence, and linking all these issues together, because it is the power of the people united that will force the hands of our leaders. Thanks for being here today. Let's get rid of this abomination, this outpost of America on the Clyde, and let's use this anger against it to build a bigger, bolder movement for independence. Thank you.
Thanks, Charlotte. As I said before, one of the debates we're having, or the arguments we're having, is with the Scottish Government as well, so it's important that we've got somebody like Bill Ramsey here from the SNP group. So, Bill Ramsey, come.
From SNP CND, actually. SNP, say the SNP. Aye, well, anyway, SNP CND is SNP members who are also members of Scottish CND. So if you're already a member of the Scottish National Party, then if you join Scottish CND, then you automatically become a member of SNP CND when you contact the Scottish CND office and you added to the list of activists. And the Greens have got a similar organisation, I believe, and so I think the AUOB. I wanted to just cover a number of different points. We're going to repeat a lot of the general points folk have made. The point about SNP policy. In 2019, during lockdown, whatever, the last lockdown, it was in August of that year, there was a motion at conference congratulating all the SNP parliamentarians, including the man you're about to hear from given his time, okay, and his colleagues in the Scottish Parliament, and the Green MSPs, and I think there was one or two others, and many of the parliamentarians at Westminster signed the International Campaign Against Nuclear Weapons pledge, committing them to the support of the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, of which Bill will say more about. That motion was passed by over 400 votes to 14. That is SNP policy. You might hear noises here and there, but that is the policy of the Scottish National Party, put to the membership at the Sovereign Conference, and there are no motions on these matters going forward to the conference in October. So that remains the policy of the Scottish National Party, despite some unfortunate comments by a few others. I'm going to say a few things about one or two issues. First of all, the concept of nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons are no more a weapon in the military sense than a kitchen knife in a drawer in a domestic dispute. It can do damage. They can be used in moments of panic and desperation, but they do not produce an outcome. There is no victories for anybody. So when people call nuclear bombs weapons, I think Calvin Clausewitz probably was spilling in his grave, because they are not weapons in the normal sense of the word, and I'm not trying to say weapons are good. We've got the situation where we have a so-called conventional war in Ukraine. Well, as you'll have noticed, and the public will have noticed, there's lots of nuclear power stations in Ukraine. There's one of them which has got 6 reactors. So the idea that you can conduct a non-nuclear war in a country that has nuclear power stations is a nonsense. Unless the protagonists are prepared to do the equivalent, put diplomatic yellow tape around all the nuclear facilities and sort of work their way around them and don't bomb them and miss them and all the rest of it. So when people say, when a conventional war takes place where there are nuclear power stations, you have the potential of a nuclear war. It's unavoidable, it is there, it's factored in. And the other thing at the moment, and I'm no supporter of Putin or Putin's war, indeed I moved the motion against it at the Scottish Trade Union Congress earlier this year, but the idea that and everybody are all internationally, what we're hearing a lot about is victory. And I'm not quite sure how you achieve a victory against a nuclear superpower. I'm not supporting Putin, I'm not supporting his illegal war, I'm not supporting his criminal acts, but how you end up winning militarily in that context, someone is still to explain to me how you achieve victory. But recently, the Royal United Services Institute, one of the oldest think tanks, military think tanks in the world, produced a 17-page report on Ukraine. Quite interesting in many ways, but it does not mention the use of nuclear weapons or the tactical nuclear weapons. It's sort of, it's a bit like a Basil Fawlty, don't mention the elephant in the room. 17 pages and not a mention. Again, a bit bizarre. And I'm going to finish by pointing an organisation to you. There's a small charity called Peace Education Scotland that was set up by Scottish CND. I'm involved in it. And we are in the process of supporting providing materials on a nuclear issue, where you have to provide a balance, quite rightly, because all teachers in Scotland are registered with the General Teaching Council, and have got to provide balanced arguments. So we try and produce and support, and there are other peace organisations that produce materials for teachers. But I want to finish, just put this thought in your head. And I was a modern studies teacher for 30 years. I do not, and I'm now, I finished with the National Level Institute last year, but I, as a modern studies teacher, teaching about the Ukraine would be, to say the least, a bit of a challenge. I mean, for instance, the idea that you can block out the real world at the classroom door has never ever been the case. But given the reportage of what's happening in that horrible war, I do not know how my colleague, I'll put no connection. I think many of my colleagues are working very hard, and to provide a balanced view on that issue at this time is very challenging for teachers. I mean, I know, and this was given to me by someone involved in peace education down south through the Quakers, that there was actually a school down south that had Russian as an elective, Russian language as an elective on its curriculum, on its, its offer, and they removed it. Now, Putin is not Russia, and Russia is not Putin. He is, of course, the leader at the moment. But doing that is not a step too far. It's just an absurdity. You know, it's getting back to the situation of 1914. And I'll leave you with that. But I think that we have to make sure that this place and the missiles and the boats in this place leave before we join NATO. I don't have a problem with the SNP joining NATO. I don't particularly like the organisation, but we can live with it. But, and this is the key thing that we have to hold to in that motion, it's important in that regard. We will only join it when the last of these boats leave these waters. Thank you.
We're just going to have a short musical interlude just now. We're on Neil Mackay is going to come up and give us a few songs before we have a few more speakers to round up the rally. Neil.
Hiya, Charlie.
Hello everyone. So you got me, there was a few of us going to sing today, but a couple of people called off, so I'm going to do 2 tracks here, okay? You might know them. The USA is being swept away, they're being swept away, they're being swept away. The USA is being swept away. They want to want us. Tell the Yanks, they drop them down the side, they drop them down the side, they drop them down the side. The Yanks, they drop them down the side, they want to want us. Some of them, they want the half a clown, they want the half a clown, they want the half a clown. Some of them, they want the half a clown, they want us. The Haley's at the trend, the sailing day to them, the sailing day to them, the sailing day to them. The Haley's at the trend, the sailing day to them, they want us. Suicide, to hear them on the climb, to hear them on the climb, to hear them on the climb. It's suicide, to hear them on the climb, we don't give up. The flight says no, you'll hate to shoot the car, you'll hate to shoot the car, you'll hate to shoot the car. No, you'll hate to shoot the car. They want to want us. At the hilltop stone, up the river Alamo, up the river Alamo, up the river Alamo. At the hilltop stone, up the river Alamo, we didn't want to want us. Catch away, but Papa Kennedy, but Papa Kennedy, but Papa Kennedy. Catch away, but Papa Kennedy, we didn't want to want us. Suicide, to hear them on the play, to hear them on the play. Suicide, to hear them on the play. We didn't want to want us. And here's one more. The man in Peter Heath, some of you may know this one as well. When you pass your resolutions and you feel you've done your best, there's nothing more you can do. Why not act in your actions and emulate the drift of the man in Peter Head who acts for you? The man in Peter Head who acts for you. He will take you back to planting the shooting stars again. For his lion heart is yours and he is spent. So workers, for your own sake, liberate the flame. You can do it fine tomorrow when you're dead. You can do it fine tomorrow. there. He is grateful for your money. He appreciates your cheers. Your sympathy is not there are more important things than resolutions, cash and tears. Why not give him just a sample of needs? Why not give him just a sample of needs? Oh, he would pay you back in plenty, shoot it sense again. For his lying heart, sure to he'll stand. So workers for your own sakes, liberate the flame. You do by tomorrow when you're there. You do by tomorrow when you're there. It was for you he got acknowledged. Sacrifice is very good. He worked for you until his head was drained. They are killing him by inches just because he thought first. They thought he will plenty. Shoot it starts again. Just get spare. So workers for your own sake, liberate the flame. You do by tomorrow when you're there. You do by tomorrow when you're there. It's a kind of virtue, if the ruling classes, but the fearless means to crush it, they have tried. For truth bestows a faith, for how the prophet and his tears. For truth, the chance of Christ was crucified. For truth, the chance of Christ crucified. Oh, he will pay you back in plenty. Shoot it stands to gain. For his lying heart, it's yours if he is spare. So workers for your own sake, liberate the flame. You do it by tomorrow when you're there. Tomorrow when you're there. You do there. You do by tomorrow if you're there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, David. Next speaker is Bill Kidd, SNPMFP. Happy to go. Thank you.
Prepare to save any clapping if you've heard me, okay? And then go wild. Thank you. You're going to get anyway, there you go. Look, I've been listening and there's been really good, strong statements here today. And the numbers that are here might not be like the numbers that we've had in the past, but as we all know, everything's been all over the place the past couple of years, and that's going to start to build up again. But the most important element of it all is that those people who are here are as committed as they ever were, and that is really what matters to independence and an independent, nuclear-free Scotland. That is why we're here, and that is why we are going forward, and we are going to deliver on that. Now, I'll tell you this, there cannot and there will not be any weakening of the commitment by the SNP and the Scottish Government to nuclear disarmament in this country. as a first step to us working towards a nuclear weapon-free world. There's no weakening on that at all. And it's in its entirety from Faslane and Coolport, anywhere in Scotland. That's the whole point of independence. We need to have the powers to deliver on these major issues, and you can't get much more of a major issue than that. Now, I spoke a number of years ago to the Kazakhstan ambassador to the United Nations, and Kazakhstan, if it had retained the nuclear weapons that were in it when it became independent from the Soviet Union, would have been the world's fourth biggest nuclear power. But the Kazakhs didn't want nuclear weapons on their soil. One of the major reasons for that is because the Soviet Union used the Semipalatinsk area in Kazakhstan to explode 456 nuclear test bombs. There are 1.5 million people today living in Kazakhstan with genetic damage caused by these nuclear weapons. People who were there at the time and people who've been born since then. That's the disgusting remnants of nuclear waste from nuclear weapons. And we've got to make sure that we are going to do like the Kazakhs did. So I spoke to their ambassador and I said, how did you get rid of them? How did you get them out of your country? And he said, we said that we're not having them. We told the Russians they'll have to remove them. And the Americans actually offered to pay for the removal, strangely enough, because they didn't want another country to have nuclear weapons that might still be friendly with Russia as far as they were concerned. So they paid for it. Well, they're not going to pay to get rid of these for us. Okay? And we don't have Russia to take them away. Now what's going to have to happen is, and I've researched this, but also a really great friend of a lot of us, John Ainsley, who sadly is no longer with us, but Scottish CND needed a great deal of his expertise and thought process, and he came up with what I pointed him to from Kazakhstan, that we can have all of these weapons, we can have them turned off from patrol as soon as we take power of these waters out here. They will be removed safely and as quickly as possible, and this is supported by Scottish CND and the Scottish Trade Union Congress. They'll be removed within a 3-year period. They'll be turned off of operation from Scotland, but we'll have them removed within that 3-year period, and there's no arguing with that. There will be no Scottish Guantanamo Bay with sleeked deals cooked up by Westminster's Caledonian cronies. That's not going to happen in this country. It's not going to happen. And just to give you a wee bit update on something that happened very recently, and it's been mentioned earlier. In 2017, I presented a letter to the President of the UN Conference on the TPNW. The letter was from the Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon, putting forward the Scottish Government's request that it be noted that Scotland wishes to support the TPNW, and that as an independent country it will be our delight and honour to be a signatory to that TPNW. So that is something that was done 5 years ago. It committed the Scottish Government full support. Now, I was in Vienna 5 weeks ago as the United Nations finally brought together the vote that introduced the TPNW into UN legislation. Now, obviously, there were people who were not there and countries who were not there, and one of them was Westminster. What a shocker. However, the majority of countries at the United Nations, they voted for these weapons to be prohibited, made illegal across the world. That's the desire which exists in countries across the world, as well as here in Scotland. And it exists in an awful lot of countries where they have nuclear weapons as well. And we have to remember that. We've got friends and colleagues who are in America, and who are in France, and who are in England, and who are in India. We've got friends who want rid of these nuclear weapons. We've actually got friends, and I was speaking to Janet Fenton earlier, in Israel, because everybody knows that Israel's got nuclear weapons, it just won't say it outright. We've got friends all around the world who support us here in Scotland and get rid of nuclear weapons, and we've got to support them at every turn. First and foremost, though, we've got to take the powers that mean that we can get rid of the nuclear weapons on this site here. Now, I'm honoured to be a co-president of PNND. That's an organisation of parliamentarians, over 900 parliamentarians from 90 countries in the world. And I'm going to be the head of delegation at the United Nations from next Thursday, talking about all of those countries wanting rid of nuclear weapons, those parliamentarians in all of those countries representing people who want rid of those nuclear weapons. And as I always ensure, there will be a message coming from here, and it will come from here today as well, to say that Scotland is a country which wrongfully has nuclear weapons sited in it, because the vast majority of the people and the government, they want rid of these weapons. They are illegally on our land because they should never have been here in the first place anyway. Anyway, as I say, I'm going to the UN. It's for the Non-Proliferation Treaty that was signed over 50 years ago now. It was signed over 50 years ago, and one of the countries that signed up to it was the United Kingdom, signed up to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And one of those elements of that document was Article 6. And Article 6 says that every country who is a signatory to the NPT will not increase the number of weapons which it has. In fact, it will draw them down over time in negotiation with other countries. Now, as was mentioned earlier, I think it was Tommy that mentioned it, 40% growth is planned in these weapons by Westminster. 40% growth, with the £205 billion cost to that. That's not acceptable either. That's breaking international law, Westminster. You're not even signing up to something that you're willing to keep to. So don't tell us whether or not we've got a right to a democratic decision to have an independent country. We are a democratic movement. We are the people of Scotland, and we want independence. And when we get that independence, the nuclear weapons, they're going. They are going. Finally, I just want to say that nuclear weapons are weapons of mass murder. That's what they are. They're not weapons of defence, they're weapons of mass murder. And we don't want them here in Scotland, and we're going to get rid of them with independence. Go on yourself.
Thanks, Bill, for that, and it's good to hear the continuing commitment of the SNP to the removal of nuclear weapons.
Just going to tell Stuart MacDonald, the SNP spokesman on defence at Westminster, who seemed to be suggesting that we continue to keep them for a period of time after independence. So, could you tell Stuart? Okay, one of the great things about the independence movement is that there are groups and organisations who work away in the background, making the case for independence, producing policy papers, producing arguments and statements, and a structure, if you like, for the sort of future of an independent Scotland. And one of these is the Commonweal, and we've got a couple of speakers here today from the Commonweal. One is Nicola Bickerstaff, who's going to speak to us first. Okay.
Hi, so nice to be here today, and it's so great to see such a great turnout. I guess I'll just start. Is there anyone here, give me a cheer if you're under 30? UOB is brilliant, because that's actually what I'm here to talk to you about today. We were setting up our stall, and one of the gentlemen says to me, "Oh, you look about 17. I was like, "Oh, I'm flattered actually." I'll tell you when I was 17 though. I was 17 in 2014. I got to cast my very first vote in the independence referendum. And, you know, it absolutely consumed our everyday lives. We were debating it day in, day out. We had our yes badges all up and down our lapels, stickers all over the school. We were making our voices heard. And then suddenly, 2 years later, our peers the same age as us, they suddenly didn't get that opportunity. They were able to vote in May, and then suddenly weren't able to vote in June. It's weird, isn't it? So what's the difference there? Well, I think we know what the difference is, isn't it? Why does Westminster not trust our young people? They are just as intelligent and just as capable and are just as deserving of having opinions as all of us here today. They're just as qualified to voice these opinions. They're just as angry and they are just as scared of this behind me as all of us here today as well. And it's not just the big issues that they have a right to have an opinion on. It is so important that we talk to younger people, that we engage with our younger people and understand how the decisions of the government that they will one day get to elect actually do affect their everyday lives. Mum, why are they closing the leisure sector? Dad, why is the parking such a safe? What can we do to change it? Those first questions that they have, that first glimmer of hope that they can actually make a change, we cannot allow that to dull. They can create change, and we have the tools to show them how. And we need to start, as I said, by just talking to them. And yeah, they might seem scary, I know. I actually used to work in resale, and we had a saying, any group larger than 3 teenagers would spell trouble. Any political conversation that you have with a young person is a good conversation. Even if you are arguing about everything constantly, it's getting them to form their own opinions and actually think for themselves and not vote how their parents told them to. We need to engage them and let them learn to think for themselves. And I guess that's why we're here today. We're here to have that difficult conversation about this thing behind me. We have to explain the risk that this poses to our future generations, to my future children, and to everyone else in the future generations' children and grandchildren are at risk from this thing behind me. Young people deserve to be a part of this conversation because it affects them too. Getting young people involved in politics is crucial to ensuring that we don't end up stuck in these endless cycles of argument and inaction. We need to learn from the mistakes being made today for a more stable and peaceful future. We need mutual de-escalation, mutual denuclearisation across the board. This won't happen overnight. This requires strong diplomacy and strong, level-headed leadership. Not leadership that parties, that slurs, that spills wine up the walls while our loved ones lay dying in the crisis they created. Let our young people see what needs to change, to compel them to come along to things like this and to change what's happening at the ballot box. It's been proven that getting young people involved in politics increases engagement across the board. It increases interest, turnout and participation at the local and national level. This is so desperately needed, now more than ever. We have a choice and we deserve a choice. Our young people deserve to be a part of this choice. Thank you very much. That was actually my first speaking engagement in public. So thank you so much for your time. If you'd like to hear more about what we do at Commonweal, we have a stall just up the back there, just next to the motorhome. And you're about to hear from my colleague Robin as well to hear a wee bit more about what we do. So thank you very much for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Right, thanks Nicola, that was well done for your first speech. We'll have you back. So, if anybody's going to Aberdeen, please, somebody's looking for a lift, so if you want to come up to the front, that would be great. Next speaker, only a couple more speakers. I was going to ask Robin McElwain to come up. Before Robin, I'm actually going to ask Donald Anderson, another veteran independence campaigner, to say a few words. So we'll have Donald and Robin, and that's the end of the rally. Okay, thanks very much, folks.
Is there anyone here under 85? You're younger than me then. I remember the original ones coming up here in the Road Deep. It came up, the Holylock, the Polaris, under Labour, Lord Wilson and Lord Callaghan, remember? The Holylock is down there. Now, I'm not going to give you facts and figures, that's well done. And thanks to Bill Kidd, that was terrific telling me that. I never knew all these things. But the Holylock is down there, and over there is Loch Long, with the NATO bases. And up there at Arica is some kind of nuclear dump. And I've been told by the press, the nuclear weapons are not pointing at Russia or anyone else, they're pointing at Glasgow. What have we done in Glasgow? So, I will be brief because I'm fed up listening to everybody else, and you'll be fed up too if I have to go. Now, this is also, it's a geography lesson, this is also Western Bartonshire, and Eastern Bartonshire's away that way to Bishop Briggs. And when Jackie Bailey was in Eastern Bartonshire, in Lindsay, she used to march with the CND. Look at her now. Now, I forgot what the CND is, I'm 85. The CND. Now she $2,000 for Jim Sillars to help her with her campaign. Now what has Jim Sillars got against us and the nuclear weapons? He never gave a penny to the Scottish Republican Socialist Movement. That's our stall down there. You can help us by joining in the tombola and buying a flag. They never gave a penny to us. Now the Barton Council used to have headed note that said the Bartonshire Council a nuclear-free zone. And even the bin lorries had on the side a nuclear-free zone. Look at it, a nuclear-free zone. I think the Labour Party speaks with 4 fingers. That's pretty what they said. And the other great white hope was Jeremy Corbyn. He had to resign as vice chair of the CND in England because he supported Trident in Parliament. And his mild reforms, very mild reforms, are nowhere near as much as the reforms actually got by the Scottish Government. And he won't talk to them, but he talked to the DUP. There's people in Scotland saying, vote Corbyn. How could you vote Corbyn? You get this guy, I've only got one MP, what's his name? Murray. And Sir Keir Starmer forgot his name. He spelled an SNP guy for being on the picket line. And he's not in the Labour Party, he's in the SNP. I can't even remember his name. You get 85, you get to the stage, and I'm going to shut up soon. You know. So I think you've got the point. No Trident and no British state. There's only one way to get rid of the British state, and that's not by marching Alderston or following, what's his name, Eddie Lizard and people like that. You have got to do it yourself. We have got to do it in other ways. Go for a British state, and preferably a Scottish Workers' Republic flag on sale at £10 down there. Thank you. We used to get them cheaper in China, but they've gone bullshit.
Okay, folks, thanks for hanging around. And our final speaker is Robin McAlpine. You come on.
Hi folks. Honestly, what to add? We've heard every argument against this monstrosity and I think it stacks up. But I want to say this, maybe just to put it this way around. Anyone else think it's maybe time that England stopped cowering under Scotland's nuclear umbrella? I'm getting a little bit sick of this idea that we're going to leave, become independent, we're doing the cowering. Well, all I can say is it looks to me like we're taking the risks and you're all sitting there lecturing us about it, telling us that if we become independent and get rid of nuclear weapons, somehow it's us that are cowering. See, I don't see it that way around. That's like one of my friends says, I'm feeling brave, I'm going to become a drug dealer. Could I stash all my gear at your house? Not that brave then. So, this idea that we're going to be the ones getting rid of this that are being irresponsible, that is the story that's being pushed in out now. The bad Russians, the bad Chinese, everyone's out to get us. And this also comes from this assumption that there's some connection between things being big and things being wise. And this isn't true. It's not the case that the big countries are showing grown-up leadership. Because what's really paining me at the moment is this is only one of the existential crises that face the world. We are seriously looking at an era when there are so many crises that face us that it's hard to know where to turn. The environmental crises, we call it the cost of living crisis, but what it really is it's a crisis of capitalism globally. And whether you're a capitalist or whether you're not, this version of it does not work. And it is damaging people now. We have the idiocy of global politics right now. A situation in where there is serious commentators who are expecting the Supreme Court of the United States of America to remove the requirement of its individual states to pass votes for a president based on what the citizens of those states voted, but just to hand them however they want. That is the end of democracy as we know it in the US. We have political crises, economic crises, environmental crises, and a crisis for humans to survive because of the endless idiocy of the so-called wise big nations and their interminable desire to point guns at each other. So, is bigger really wiser? No, a big baby's still a baby. And we can be the people who show the leadership. And I cannot stress this enough. It is not about saying that Scotland's a plucky wee country that could. It's not about saying we've got wonderful natural resources, though we do. It's about saying that Scotland is an independent country that chooses to do the right things and to tackle these challenges like a grown-up can show the leadership. We can come here and within a tiny period of time end most of the nuclear weapons that are stored in Western Europe. We can just dispose of that terror. Is that not some kind of a leadership that makes you feel powerful as a nation? We have more opportunity than almost any nation state in the world right now to decarbonise our economy and our society. Not as a struggle, not as pain, but as gain, because our natural resources mean that we have no need to rely on dirty energy and dirty materials like plastics. We have the land, the people, the expertise, the skills, the knowledge. If we have the courage, we can be the nation that creates the agenda which changes things. In fact, what I think we need to do on this and so much else is say that Scotland will lead the way and we will ask others to follow, and when they follow, we'll get together with the others. And what we will do is we'll start a process of boycott and divestiture and sanctions against those big babies, the Americans and the Chinese and the Russians and everybody else who is refusing to change. And we will say, us the small nations, we are the grown-ups in the room. We are the ones that actually believe the science. We are the ones that realise there is no such thing as an arms race, because a race has a finish line. And when you keep believing that somehow one more technological development will give you that secret weapon, which means that you'll never have to worry again, with this crazy idea that the other lot can't do the same thing. So now we're at hypersonic weapons. For those that don't know, China, Russia and America have all got hypersonic weapons. These things go into these go into space and fly around the planet. and then comes hurtling straight down at you so that you get no advanced warning. There is no deterrent against a hypersonic weapon. You don't know it's coming. You can't deter something that can destroy 100 cities, if they launched 100 of them, in one go without notice. You can't win a race without a finish line. We know that. We know that as a small country that's hosted these abominations. Scotland can be a country that changes the relationship between its workers and its wealth. We can show that it doesn't have to either be poverty for all or poverty for a chunk. We can change that story, and we can reinforce a democracy that honestly in Scotland right now is better than most but not good enough. Our democracy needs to get better. And if we do these things, if Scotland does any of these things, we become the shining light. We become the grown-up in the room. We become the people that others look to. That is power. Not wavering about the size of your weapons, wavering about the strength of your intent to do the right thing, to lead this world into a place where we can live together without fear of whether our children are going to have a world to live in. Because right now, it is time to wake up. They don't. Right now, for those who don't understand this, my brother has got my kids away up to St Andrews for the day. If you don't know this, in the near future you'll all have to go and do your farewell tours. Because are you aware that there is literally no version of climate change modelling in which St Andrews makes it to the end of this century? None. The best version of it, 1.5%, St Andrews is gone. At 1.5% heating, there is no Hillington. Glasgow Airport is a subaquatic space. Are we really believing this stuff? Because we're about 30 or 40 or 50 years away from realising that the beach isn't there, the beach is over there. So who's the grown-ups? The ones who are saying, oh, well, you know, maybe carbon capture and storage will sort us at some point in the future. The ones who are saying we're going to do it now. So I don't want to say nukes are bad. It's fairly self-evident. They kill people. Things that kill people broadly accepted to be bad. I don't think we have to make much of a case that Scotland really has had the target on its back for long enough now. And if the rest of the UK really wants to keep these monsters, maybe it's time for them to get that target and lob it on their own back. See how it feels, see how it fits. Perhaps they might like to take a shot of that. These are things that we can do. This is power. Scotland can be powerful if we take those powers, and that is the message. We are not begging for a world without nuclears. We are signalling our intention to begin the process. We are not begging the world to make an environmental performance, to move to an environmental performance which gives us a future. We are making a commitment that we are going to lead it. If that isn't a reason to believe that Scotland is worth fighting for, then I don't know what is. Because I can finish by telling you this. No good will come of dependence. Nobody's doing anything about that as it stands. Nobody's doing anything about our climate as it stands. Nobody is doing anything about the relationship between the ordinary people of a nation and its economy as it stands. No good will come from dependence. Whether good comes from independence, who knows, but it's in our hands, and we have the power to make the world a better place. And if that isn't something worth getting up in the morning for, God knows what is. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, folks, that's the end of the rally. Thanks for coming. A couple of wee announcements. Mike Fennick says he's still here. Do you want to sign his statement? He's over there. Just to flag up, there's a few more demos coming up in the future if you're able to come out. 20th of August in Inverness. So if you're able to get up to Inverness, that would be great. 10th of September in Falkirk, and then a really big one, I hope, on the 1st of October in Edinburgh, where we want to see a big mobilisation of the independence movement, because we're not going to do it unless people get organised, get mobilised, and start to fight on a day-to-day basis. So we're looking for a big turnout in October. So thanks folks for coming. Hopefully we'll see you in Inverness. Thank you.
Right, folks, I told some of yous Brian Quayle was here and some of yous wanted to say hello, so I'll take him over. I think they're